This is Sunday Assembly Manchester, and we are a secular community that celebrates life. We have three main things: live better, help often, and wonder more. We believe that we have this life now, and whatever else there is in the world and whatever else is going to happen later, we're not too sure on what that would be, but we do know that we're here right now on a Sunday morning, which is brilliant. I am Louise, I'm your host for the Assembly, and I hope we're going to have a lot of fun, we're going to learn. Feel free, please, to like us on Facebook, follow us and what have you, because on there will be some notices, not only about our weekly assemblies here at Manchester, but also about book clubs, craft groups, which we will tell you about later in the assembly. Our theme for today, which is quite appropriate actually, because we had snow and we didn't know that this was going to happen. We had one day of snow in Manchester and it was very lovely. Caused complete chaos and meltdown for anyone travelling anywhere, just the tiniest bit of snow. But it was very beautiful and very Christmassy to have that day of snow. So today's assembly is about Winter Wonderland. And we're going to talk about a very specific journey. So in Sunday Assembly, we have a poet and a speaker each week and a different theme. And I was thinking about journeys because when the lockdown first happened, I noticed that one of the reasons you could leave the house is if you were running. So I noticed everyone took up running. I was like, how? There's so many people taking up running. But I actually think that's a really good thing. People are on their bikes, they're running. I've started open water swimming, and it's things that I would never have done if it wasn't really quite the only thing that there was left to do. But also journeys have a metaphorical meaning as well. And one of my favourite poems is from it's by Robert Frost, and it's called The Road Not Taken, which I'm sure is a poem that you're familiar with. And I will leave the end of the poem till later on, but I just wanted to share this little bit with you. So it starts with, two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveller. Long I stood, I looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth, and then I took the other, just as fair, having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for that passing there, had worn them about the same. Both that morning equally lay, in leaves no step had trodden back. Oh, I kept the first for another day, and yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubt if I would ever come back. So you might be familiar with that poem about the choice between two paths. And I always think about this whenever I make a decision in life or whenever I'm doing anything. What path to take, the path that everyone takes or the path that no one has taken. And this is incredibly appropriate for today because we're going to learn about our literal journey that someone took, our real genuine journey. And this might inspire you once lockdown has been lifted to do your own journey, maybe this one. But also I hope you think about it in a metaphorical term that we're all on our own journey, which we most definitely are. So this is something that I think about what road you take. And almost that moment in Sliding Doors where she just misses her tube, without spoiling the film for anyone who's not seen it. It was quite old. She just misses her tube and then has a completely different life based on those sets of circumstances. I just find that very fascinating. To help us to think about our Winter Wonderland and the journey that we're going to be going on, I'd like to introduce our first guest for you today. It is our poet, who is Andy N, who I'm going to spotlight for you as soon as I have found him. So we're going to go absolutely wild for, oh, there he is, smiling. And can we please appreciate this Christmas jumper that Andy N is wearing?
Oh, it's how
truly festive. So Andy, I'm going to remove myself so you can speak. Ladies and gentlemen, Andy N.
Thanks, Louise. It's great to be here again, guys. I did this last year and it was back, obviously we were in Hume. It was a great experience. So I'm going to do 3 poems for you today, and they're all quite brand new ones as well, so just to be awkward. Now, the first one is called Closed Winter Wonderland by the Seafront. And this is a true story, actually. It happened to me in Brighton like about 10 years ago now. And I went to Brighton just for Christmas and got caught in a no downpour by the promenade and the pier. So this is that piece. Sculpting new kinds of art just off the beach. The snow comes down unexpected, turning the winter wonderland on the pier into a one-way walk, turning your every footstep into a swirl of imaginative fingers and a magic moment into a literal nightmare within minutes. Freewheeling the opening hours and the constant ho-ho-hos of Father Christmas into a sudden closed as the staff rush everybody out or pulling down the shutters, gripping the handlebars outside, tapping the keypad number frantically until the beep carries out Morse code in the wind. Fake snow on the entrance into ice in 10 minutes. One of the attendants blowing a whistle like a lifeguard, signalling swimmers to stop messing around in the sun. A sudden panic, get off the ice rink quick. And the old gypsy lady stood there with a crystal ball, her arms pointing northwards, like she was directing it to her, as the snow covered first her hand, then her body absorbed in the moment, almost like she was carrying the memory of some kind of past life in her tears, turbulent in regret, the more the snow came down. Okay, I like long titles of pieces, and you'll guess it's on the next one as well. Now, the next one's going to be from, not really, a bit more ambiguous towards winter, this one, but this is from my next book I'm working on at the moment, which is called Changing Carriages at Birmingham New Street, which is a series of letters between a couple. This one's kind of bigger on winter, but you'll see why. And anybody wonders who Freddie Phillips is? Well, I can't remember the title of this one. He used to do the music for Camden Green and Trumpton. So this poem's called Playing Trumptown Cover Versions with Freddie Phillips at the Edge of Stonehenge. Wandering through the countryside, whose idea was it to stop a few miles outside Stonehenge, sitting there that afternoon with a hastily prepared picnic and acoustic guitars in hand, and recreate Freddie Phillips's work in Trumpton? It was never he lived anywhere near there, but you wanted to sit there near Stonehenge with my old cassette recorder laying next to my car, determined to learn a few of his tracks in a slightly slower key than what cassette played in that. F you told me when I stumbled onto E, when we went through the fireman drill, I started to play Windmiller's song, when you wanted to play P.C. McGarry's theme, smiling silently to yourself when you realised I'd drunk way too much cider for you to get much sense out of me by then. Mr. Barvin, Mr. Honeyman, Mr. Swallow, I tried to keep up with you stumbling around my fretboard, imagining I was a genius, when in reality I'm barely an amateur. Frost third next to our car in a blanket, looking slowly at the sunset. The past festered in the heart, counting notes again in the dawn over the nearby fields. Music from our childhood, drawing us both together again, burying our guitars into our emotions, our love into barleycorn. Okay, last one now. Right, this last one is going to be a single, coming out as a single actually fairly soon for a French record label, and I forgot the name of it, so I can't help you there. But this one's, it's a bit of prose, this one more than poem, I guess, but it's something a bit abstract to finish with, and it's a bit more funnier. Unexpected Christmas present. Who sent him it? It wasn't clear. I was tied up next to the Christmas tree in huge wrapping paper and a blank label. When I tried opening it, he moved away from him towards the fire, growling. What? He said to his wife, Molly. Do you get me this? I thought it was you, she answered. It wasn't there when I went to bed last night, and I went to bed an hour before you. It wasn't me either. He looked at it, still in its wrapping paper, shivering next to the fire. One of the boys hasn't gone and kidnapped Mrs. Johnson's cat for a joke, has it? No, they haven't, it answered. It was my ex-employer. He left me here. Tommy looked at Molly in shock as he saw a reindeer with a huge red nose start to unwrap itself from the wrapping paper. Rudolph? Molly said, shocked. Who else do you think it'll be? Rudolph pulled himself out of his wrapping paper. I've been trying to get out this paper all night. Who did this to you? Tommy said eventually, after sweeping the wrapping paper away. Who do you think? Father Christmas! Their two sons said, running into the room, only to stop when they saw Rudolph sat on the armchair with a glass of mulled wine in his hand. Dad? One of them said, looking at him. Is that? Yeah, it is. Rudolph began, then stopped. It's me. Father Christmas sacked me. Sacked you? Molly said, coming back from the kitchen after leaving the two boys with some porridge. He's such a bore, Rudolph carried on. I was only joking when I suggested a wife swap. I didn't expect him to kick me out halfway across the sky and dump me here. That's terrible. Do you want me to ring him? Surely you can sort this out, Tommy asked. It'd be a little difficult, Rudolph blushed. Why? The other reindeers have gone on strike after they heard what happened to me. Strike? They never like me anyway, I'm not bothered. And your wife? Don't ask. It was going to be a long day. And that's me done, guys.
Thank you very much. Go wild for Andy N. What a great story. I absolutely love it. Andy, we love to ask our poets if you can share if you have any books or places we could read your poets and poems. And I think you might have a podcast. Tell us.
I do indeed, yes. Yeah, I've got 4 books out at the moment. You get them all on Amazon. The most recent one is a book called The Streets Are All We Could See. And that's the more mini poetry. These are all, the 3 I've done today are all brand new ones, so they're not in books yet, but they will be. Podcast to do is a podcast, the main one is one called Spoken Label. And that's where I chat to poets and artists on usually 1 or 2 a week normally. People have done here, Tony's been on it before recently, and Jeffrey Armour has as well. So there's been a few, I've done over about 260 of them in about 4 or 5 years now. So it's grateful.
Excellent. So we'll put the details in the chat box so that you can get hold of that. But thank you very much. Give it up for Andy N.
Yes,
Thank
guys.
you so much. And by the way, I absolutely love the jumper.
Oh, it's got to be done.
It's Christmas, don't you know? So before I was talking about that poem by Robert Frost about taking the roads, and I'm going to read the final paragraph of that poem now because that is the most beautiful bit of it. I'm going to mute Andy. Thank you. So I'm just going to read the final bit to you, which is my favourite bit of the poem. So it's, I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence, 2 roads diverge in a wood, and I took the one last travelled by, and that has made all the difference. And the reason I find comfort in that poem is that sometimes when you're a little bit different, you can feel that you can't walk the same path as everybody else. So that's where I get the meaning. Obviously, it's metaphorical. You might get your own meaning from it. But I get this, well, maybe my path is a little bit different to everybody else's. And that makes me feel happy. And also, you could say that taking risks might be the road less travelled, as well as many people have who've invented things and created great art, whatever they've done. Phil has told me that quantum uncertainty means that you can take both paths while being one traveller as long as no one is looking. So I just want to let you know from a quantum point of view, that is very much possible. Thank you very much to everybody who's giving your love to Andy, our poet today. And we are going to move on to our speaker. So we're talking about Winter Wonderland. We're talking about travel. Journeys. We haven't really been able to go that far in any way, and I know it may be frustrating for you if you've not had a holiday or things have been cancelled, you've not been able to go places, but we have virtually travelled. Literally, with my background, I can be anywhere in the world, and at the moment I am somewhere. I am in Sweden behind me. Not really, I'm still in the same room, but there is an opportunity to travel, and I've definitely taken the opportunity to travel around different places. And Sunday Assembly being a group of people, we're Manchester, but there's one in London, there's several around the UK, there's several in America, there's several around the world. And when I say several, it's quite a few. So there is the possibility, if you want, to travel to different ones. So don't feel stuck. You're in a community where you can have a flip round and see different things. I would like to now introduce our speaker, who has genuinely been on a huge journey. Not recently, I might add, but when I find him, there he is. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce to you Matthew Jeffrey. Hello, Matthew. Go wild, wave, wave, wave. And we're going to talk about a literal journey. So for this, I'm going to stay on screen because I'm going to ask Matthew a couple of questions as he talks us through, and we might get the opportunity to see some pictures. I find this path here that we're going to talk about quite difficult to pronounce. Would you like to tell me the walk that you did, Matthew?
I walked only a quarter of the Kungsleden, which is known as the King's Trail in English.
King's Trail makes a lot more sense. I was saying it just then a second. I was going to Kungslien, and Matthew kept saying it back to me slightly differently, and I thought I was saying it, but I don't know whether I was. So I apologise for that. Tell me why you decided to walk this trail and what it is.
Okay, so the reason why I decided is it starts in a bit of an odd place. I did this just over 3 years ago, just before my 30th birthday, and a year before that, I went on a holiday with some friends of mine, and we were planning to go down to the West Country, stay in a cabin for a week, and just play board games. We almost completely accomplished that. One person did have to have a baby at the time, so she went off and didn't play any more board games. But as we were traveling down there, my friends put on a mixtape of some music, and I'd never heard the music before. It's sort of like it's a genre of music called dungeon synth, which is a kind of like an ambient, kind of lonely, dark kind of music that sounds vaguely like if somebody from the 80s had composed the Lord of the Rings soundtrack. And this one album kind of got stuck in my head, and I kept listening to it even once I got home. And it was evoking these thoughts in my mind of somebody just sort of wandering across like an endless, expansive environment with nobody around. So I thought I would try and replicate that myself. So I did some research. I searched for sort of nearby, hiking trails, and I found the Kungsleden, which is in northern Sweden, really northern Sweden. It's above it's within the Arctic Circle. So unfortunately, it wasn't a winter wonderland. Effectively, it's Arctic Circle. So over the summer months, you get 20 hours of daylight and about 4 hours of the sun kind of just about dips below the horizon and then comes back up. You can't do it in winter because it's dark the whole time, and there's nobody there aside from, I think, some of the Sami people, who are the indigenous people that live up there, and herd reindeer and things like that.
I'm guessing they very much know what they're doing with the terrain. And
they definitely do.
A stranger walking alone probably hasn't got the ability to navigate that. So you listened to an album which inspired you of Lord of the Rings synth. Then you found your wilderness and you set off on your journey.
I did, yeah.
How long did it take you to do the entire thing?
So taking out all the travel and things like that, which has its own difficulties, flying into Stockholm, and then you can either take a train which goes all the way up to the beginning, or you can fly up to a town called Kiruna, which I did, which itself is a quite lonely, isolated place. It's home to the world's largest iron mine, and everybody that lives in the town either works for the town supporting the miners or are miners. So you go up there, you drive a couple more hours in a coach, and you finally get to the beginning. The journey itself took about 9 days. It's the way that the Swedish Tourist Association has sort of set things up is that they want to make, so the trail itself in total is 270 miles, and I only walked a quarter of that, but it still felt like a lot of walking. They maintain and have built this whole trail, and the first quarter, the part that I did, is the better maintained and supported area, because even though they have an involvement in making the place somewhere that you can hike through without being completely off the grid, it's still out in the wilderness. You've still got to contend with the fact that there are harsh conditions, there are wild animals. I didn't see any bears, but I did see various other things sort of wandering about. So it was 9 days in total, moving from, they've set up sort of campsites which have cabins that have sort of emergency support things. About half of them have facilities for purchasing food if you need to. So if you want to travel like I did, and you can kind of purchase food as you go along. I'll show you a picture of some of the food later if you want. It might stretch the definition of food for some people. It's mostly bags of powdered blobs and you add hot water. They also have facilities for washing yourself, which is a sauna. That's pretty much all you get. But I'd have a sauna in my house if I could. Beats a bath any day.
Did you stay within the huts themselves, or did you have to camp? How did it work when you had to sleep overnight?
I decided to stay within the huts because I'm not a particularly experienced hiker. I'd never done anything, even like an overnight hike. So deciding to do 9 days overnighting on my own, I wanted to make sure that I minimized the chance of things going drastically wrong, because it's such a remote place that if, for example, you break your leg, then they call out a helicopter, which is the only thing that they have to actually maintain the place anyway. The helicopter will take you away, and then they'll charge you, I think it's something like £1,000 once you translate it from Swedish crowns.
Yes, so you don't want that to happen. Did you decide to do it on your own, or did you take anybody with you?
No, I decided I really wanted to do it on my own and to see what that experience was like.
Okay, I feel as if, and tell me if I'm wrong, that you sort of got to 30 and you thought, I need a challenge. Is that what it felt like?
Sort of. It wasn't like I was having some sort of crisis or anything. I just thought, well, 30's coming up, so I might as well just use the excuse as a milestone, as people often do, like just do a thing.
Was there any moments in the trip where you felt it was particularly perilous? Did you come across a bear or anything that made you feel?
No bears, thankfully. I think the bears that live up there are the kind of bears that mostly are afraid of human beings and tend to avoid them. And if any bears wander around into the main sort of valleys that you hike through, I think they usually capture them, get the helicopter again, and then take the bear somewhere very far away and just leave it. So
there's every possibility that you'll be sort of stood there and you'll go, is that a bear?
Yeah.
Airlifted. How unusual. How strange. Was there any other moment that you thought, this is a bit of a risk?
There was one at the start which worried me a little bit. So I'd very carefully chosen everything that I needed, thought about the weight of my pack, going for sort of like I'm prepared but with a bare minimum. And I bought a nice water bottle with a water filter so that I could fill it up from the rivers or the streams and things, and everything would be fine. And got onto the coach at Kiruna to head up to Abisko tourist station, which is where everything starts. Slung my bag in the hold of the coach. Sat on the coach for a couple of hours talking to an American guy whose name was Bob, I think. Got out the coach, picked up my rucksack, started hiking. Half an hour in, I thought, I'll get some of my water. Turned to get my water out the side pocket. Nothing there. And I looked in my bag, and then it occurred to me that it probably had just fallen out in the hold of the coach and was now driving down to the nearest civilization. So there was a bit of nerves there, thinking, oh no, I'm out in the middle of nowhere and I've not got a water bottle or anything. But then I took a few moments and thought about it. I'm a few hours from the first place I need to go. There are people there. They'll have water there. They'll probably have water bottles. So when I got thirsty, thankfully, the first leg of the journey is past a huge raging river, which had overflowed significantly because it was sort of like high summer kind of time, so everything's melted, everything's fine now. So I just sort of drank from the river with my bare hands, like Gollum or something like that. And then when I got to the first proper stop, I found an old discarded water bottle, boiled it up in some water, and then used that as my water bottle for the rest of the time. And it's because of where the whole hike is taking place, you don't have to worry about water really being contaminated or anything. It's not really a risk.
Yes. What was it about this particular journey that you thought was alluring? Why did you choose this walk of the many walks there are around the world?
Well, I think it was partly because it was close enough to sort of reach without breaking the bank or anything like that, and a large part of it was knowing that it was something that I could do on my own, but it was also it's kind of like the tourist association has kind of managed the experience in a way that, you know, I walked sometimes for an entire day without seeing another human being, but I felt comfortable in the way that everything was like handled up there, that if there was any problem, then I would probably be okay. So I wanted it to be a first sort of experience of like a big, long, lonely hike, but without the very real risk that if you were to do something like that and have an accident, then, you know, that would be curtains.
And when you were traveling, you know, you're talking about having a whole day without seeing anybody. Did you feel lonely?
I felt more lonely when I was at cabins and saw people who were together in groups. So I quite like my own company, and there were a couple of occasions where I walked with some other people. I met an Israeli AI scientist who was doing the hike on his own, and we had some talks about various things, and then he went a bit further on, decided to kind of power through. And I spent some time on the last day walking with a guy called Tito, who's an EMT from New York who decided to go traveling in Europe. And yeah, we met at one of the more picturesque locations on the hike, and then decided to sort of travel together for a day. But yeah, I think not having anyone to share the experience with at the time was probably the lonely bit when you see other people around. So I definitely want to do more of it in the future, and persuaded my fiance to come along with me. So we'll probably have another go at the first part.
I believe she's on the call, so maybe we can.
Yes, and now this is recorded, so you know it's
being signed up to your fiance. That's great. I don't know whether you recognise this bit. I'm assured that this is part of it. Did you see anything like this bit?
So that I don't recognise it offhand. It looks similar. There's a place, probably the most picturesque part of the journey that I went on, was to a place called Tuisiara. Apologies to any Swedish speakers if I mispronounced that. So the main quarter of the walk that people do, you go down to a place, you start at a place called Abisko, you walk down to a location called Singi, and then you can split off to walk up to the highest mountain in Sweden called Kebnekaise, and then onto a place called Nikkaluokta. Or you can continue heading south along the main trail, and that's where all the tourists disappear. I think I saw about 4 human beings in that entire period, kind of diverging from where the tourists are.
You went the road less travelled, Matthew.
I definitely did the road less travelled, and it was really worth it. And getting to Tuisiara, all the best things happened there. So you have to walk down this very steep mountain to get to a lake, and on the shore of the lake is the place where you can stay. If you want to continue the hike, you have to cross the lake. You either pay a man who calls himself the captain, because the cabins are all manned by volunteers in the summer. So this guy called the captain will ferry you over the lake in his boat if you pay him. Otherwise, they have a system where they have 3 rowboats, and this is a system which they have across the rest of the journey, because the areas where there aren't much tourist support, there's one section where you probably would be walking for about a week, maybe 5 days if you really went for it, and there's nothing. So they have these rowboats, and you get into a rowboat, you go to the other side. If there's another rowboat on the other side, then you have to take the additional rowboat back, so that people have always got rowboats to use.
It's,
so when I got
yes, it's like that puzzle when you have to take a fox and several chickens across a river.
Yeah, exactly. You have to make sure that there's enough fox left on the other side for people's chickens. But this looks like possibly part of the lake, like the series of lakes that go off sort of, I think, east from Tuisiara. And I met a man who had been paddling up one of those lakes, because most people are walking south. And I met a man who was also called Matthew, who was walking north, who had gotten in a boat, paddled up the lakes, and I'd met him just as he'd gotten there, and we started chatting, and he was cooking a fish, and he had 10 minutes before I got down there, rather illegally caught a fresh Arctic salmon from the lake without anybody seeing, and was cooking up this fish that had been completely alive and healthy 10 minutes earlier. That was the best fish I've ever eaten in my life, and not just because I was eating packets of weird rehydrated things for days, but it was just, you know, most food comes out of a freezer or a fridge somewhere, and that had literally just come out of the water in a picturesque place.
Tony's just accused me of having a picture of Rochdale. This isn't Rochdale, although Rochdale is just as beautiful. Questions are coming into the chat box, I have noticed, and thank you for that. So I do appreciate that people are asking questions. So I will get one going from Tony. How often did you encounter other people and the range of nationalities? So you've alluded to that a little bit, and you had days. I mean, did you regularly see people? And I would like to add a follow-on question: were the volunteers in the huts quite happy to see somebody?
Oh, the volunteers in the huts, sort of more to the north part, the popular part, they'll see people all the time. And in fact, a couple of the times, the huts were sort of, all the beds were full. But once you get off of the touristy part of the trail, yeah, you do see far fewer people. I could share some of the pictures that I've chosen from. I took a lot of pictures whilst I was up there.
Yeah, that would be lovely to see.
Nationalities of people, there might be something quite useful.
While you find that, I'm just going to change my image behind me to just show you another example. But I like the picturesque one, just so that you think that it's not all wondrous. There's a slightly more bleaker picture. Did this look familiar at all, Matthew?
Yes.
Behind me.
So, I mean, I couldn't say where that was because that's basically what you see every day. But the way that the whole place is kind of set up is that the trail. I bought maps and things like that. You know, I've got maps and maps and maps and maps and maps. But I barely ever referred to my maps because the trail is marked partly by use, partly by these planks, which also help because a lot of the area is, I don't know what the proper geographical term was, I would say waterlogged. You get a lot of places which, because in the winter it's just covered in snow so deep you couldn't walk through it, that everything is very sort of boggy a lot of the time. So the planks help as a guide on the path, but also in a lot of areas, something you can walk over to avoid sinking into a very deep, like huge puddles.
We do have a geologist with us, so if you can put the correct term is, we're saying boggy, but there might be someone else who might know. I did the Tongariro crossing in New Zealand, and it had decking like this, but much wider. And it was almost like someone had put a load of B&Q decking out, and I found it really, in the wilderness, quite disturbing because obviously you're in the middle of nowhere, and suddenly someone's put out some B&Q decking.
Can you see my shared screen at the moment?
It's all there. You talk us through that now.
So this is from a map of the world, which I haven't included in the photos, where people marked off where they'd come from. The bulk of the people that I met were Germans, lots of German tourist groups and things. I think the Germans really enjoy hiking up there. But as you can see, there's a lot of people from all sorts of different places all over the world. I think the place has a reputation enough as a wonderful sort of hiking destination that it's got a lot of people along. In terms of the planks of wood, I'll see if I can find.
So if you have any further questions for Matthew, please put it in the chat. But here we go. Has he got a bear?
The helicopters actually carry these over, carry over the planks and all sorts of the wood. And I saw a couple of times the helicopters dropping down various supplies because I was walking at kind of the end of August, and really you want to be done by early to mid-September because that's when it starts getting worse in terms of the weather with snow and stuff. and then by the end of September, you're starting to get into, eternal darkness. So at this point, they're dropping off a lot of the supplies so that when the snow melts, then the next year, they can go through the trail, see what needs replacing, and do all of that work. There is also that isn't a helicopter, but he was just having a nice time at the helicopter pad at one of the.
I was about to say that's an adorable looking helicopter.
Yeah, you have to pay him £1,000 and then he'll take you home.
Very helicopter. Just pop us a couple more on to give us an idea of your journey.
Oh, sure. Well, I'll sort of I'll just briefly swing through a few things then.
Yeah, go through a slideshow and I'll ask you a couple of final things before we have to sadly.
So this is the album cover of the album Depressive Silence, which is not depressing or silent, which inspired my walk.
I would like to say, if you do listen to that, a disclaimer that we cannot be held responsible if it makes you want to go on walks like this.
It's a wonderful piece of music, and I listened to it. I told myself I wouldn't listen to it until I felt like it was the right time. So I listened to it once on the hike when I was on my own, and it was incredible. We've got some pictures of reindeer. So the Sami people, who are the indigenous people that live up there, they farm reindeer. They have the only settlement that has Wi-Fi in the entire region, and even that's a fairly small settlement. They herd the reindeer in very modern ways using snowmobiles and the helicopter when they need to get the reindeer into a particular place. And the reindeer will often wander into Norway because the mountain passes are all very accessible, so they need to be controlled. There's a reindeer gate, so you have to kind of manipulate that yourself so that the reindeer don't get through. More modern reindeer gate.
Judith would like to know if you had any problems with mosquitoes when you were there, because I've been to Iceland. There's a lot of midges that attack you in your face.
There were part of the reason I chose to travel later in August is because by that point the mosquitoes are meant to have gone away, but unfortunately, due to increasing global weather problems, there were a fair few mosquitoes. I didn't have too much of a problem when I started, but the end of the journey, I'll have a little map for the whole thing.
I think we'll just do the end a little bit, and then sadly we're going to have to bring it to an end.
No worries.
Thank you very much. This is great. Sean would like to know if there's any particular part that stood out to you, or was just all of it fantastic?
It was all lovely, but I think Toisiara and Baktavar at the end were probably the best.
Let's talk about the end a little bit, because I remember, again, talking about New Zealand that I mentioned before, the Tongariro crossing. There is another trek across New Zealand around, I think it's called the Milford Trail, because it goes on to Milford Sound. And Milford Sound is its ending, this sort of fjord. And I was on Milford Sound on a boat, and they took us to the end of the trail. It's a 3-day trek. And when I got to the end, there were just hiking boots thrown everywhere, because the ceremony is you take your shoes off and you throw it over the end of the trail in victory. So they're all just hanging off the trees, all these hiking boots. Is there any sort of Swedish ritual that anyone did to leave their mark, maybe a pile of stones along the way or anything like that?
There are a lot of piles of stones sort of made along the route. You can kind of see them as you're going through a lot. There's some trail markers that people have just sort of built up. This is sort of walking over a high mountain pass where you were getting to a point where it started snowing after about a minute of starting to walk onto this thing because it's so high up. But in terms of like celebratory rituals, I did do one at Toisiara. So the whole thing of having to attend to bathing by going into a sauna was an experience for an English person who has the sort of English cultural hang-ups. And I decided that I would do that very stereotypical image that we have of people with saunas, of running out of the sauna and jumping into a lake, which was really fun, really refreshing. I didn't have my glasses on, so I ran the wrong direction and nearly slipped over on some rocks and cracked my head open. But otherwise, it was really great, and I highly recommend it.
Amazing. George has just said throwing boots just seems like virtual littering. Yes, it does a little bit, George. They do put it up in the trees over the end of it, which I know does sound like littering, but it's also like a weird sort of walking shrine at the same time. It's not as bad as when you walk through the woods and people have got bags of dog doo-doo that they seem to hang off the trees. Not as bad as that. So it does seem like littering, but it's more like a sort of shrine to walking. They don't just throw them everywhere. They're in a thing, which is, I admit, a little bit rude in the countryside, but also seems like a bit of a, I don't know, like a focal point of some kind. So just to explain that. Tell us about this ending then, Matthew, that you enjoyed.
So when you usually end at Vara, you can then take a boat ride over to the next leg of the journey at Sarek National Park at Saltokta, I think it is, where there's a big proper wooden cabin where I had my first actual meal for about 2 weeks, which was reindeer. I apologise. And yeah, just having a nice warm place to stay and feeling like you'd kind of returned a little bit to civilization, although that's where all the mosquitoes had congregated.
They were waiting for you.
Yeah, they were waiting a bit further south.
What was it about the end part, other than the relief of finishing, that you found beautiful?
Really just knowing that I wanted to kind of do it again, to be honest.
Yes.
I really like to get good enough at the camping side and the preparation and the safety side of things to do the whole thing, but that takes about a month. I've watched a few kind of documentaries that people have made of their journeys, and yeah, it looks like a really fun adventure, but one that I need to work up towards.
If someone was listening now and they were thinking of doing a walk like this, is there one main tip that you could give them, or some words of wisdom that you learned? Bring your water bottle.
Yeah, bring your water bottle. There's my water bottle that I salvaged. My best friend. That was my Wilson on the journey. I would recommend just doing a little bit of research. It's if you're a confident camper, unlike myself, and you bring your own gear and your own food and things, then it's a relatively cheap thing. And I met somebody who had been walking up and down the trail for about 3 months off of the back of a few months of programming work. But if you want to do it more in a sort of a lighter way of staying in cabins, buying food, then just make sure that you have the money to do it, because it's expensive to get all the supplies up there. So it's expensive to purchase the supplies afterwards. But otherwise, yeah, there was nothing really worrying or ultimately concerning about it. So I would say approach it with a sense of adventure and yeah.
And finally, do you have were you enlightened in any way, and do you have any traveller's wisdom for us? Did you have a thought? Because I'm thinking you're walking along for 24 hours, no one's there, you're just looking at a relatively similar landscape, if maybe you're at this bit. Anything that came to your head, or it's okay if the answer's no, but
no, I'd say one thing I learned is not to walk too fast.
There you go, ladies and gentlemen, the words of wisdom is don't walk too fast. Good point, well made. So I'll just put you back. Go wild then for Matthew Jeffrey. Thank you so much for sharing your journey, and I really, really hope that inspires people to go on, and good luck in the future, particularly to your fiance who seems to be going on this journey. Certainly didn't put you off. This is what I love about it. So that is it, and I'm hoping that will inspire you to go on your own personal journey, whether that be a walk around your local area or something a little bit more challenging, or whether you have your own challenge in life to pursue. So that's what I hope. We've got lots of love coming in for Matthew, and thank you very much for his time as well. And I hope this has inspired you to take on your own journey, either physically or metaphorically, because life is a journey, as we know. And I'd like to just give a massive round of applause to our speakers here, to Andy N, our poet, and also to Matthew Jeffrey. We are going to have a moment of silence, more songs, more fun here at Sunday Assembly, but we're called to just stop the recording now, Adam.